Okay. So we are here for another session of Ask Me Anything. And we have here Thomas Roch. You are coming from where?
So I'll stay in Scotland, like in Glasgow.
Cool.
But you probably, if you've went to my talk, you probably realize I do have a French accent. So I'm originally from France.
Okay. And you were talking about reactive programming,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So we will take some questions from Slido and also some other questions from the people here in the session. And let's start picking one of the questions here. So which problem use case React with Reactive is solving? Working with Redux, but never encounter any such problem where reactivity was required.
Okay.
Not an easy one.
So in fact, it's not necessarily the case of what is React with Reactive solving, but more what reactive programming is solving.
Okay.
So it's something which has been mentioned in the talk from David Kurdish, which was after mine, about stage charts, is actually the ability to manipulate time.
Cool.
So reactive programming works in a way where you push data and people, or like subscribers can subscribe to something they're interested in. And what that means is that baked in reactive programming is when no one is subscribing to something, it doesn't happen anymore. So that can come very handy for canceling requests. So if you're doing something like switch map, which is an operator I've demonstrated, like what it's going to do is going to only subscribe to the latest request, which means that it will cancel the previous one. And you've got to, like, that happens without even you having to worry about it. And then there's a time aspect, which is for anything you want to debounce and throttle,
Yes.
and limit basically the performance aspect. So one example is how many requests you want to make. Typically, when a user is tapping inside an input, you don't want to make a request on every single key they press, because that would be too many requests. So instead, you can say, oh, I want to debounce that input by 300 milliseconds, and only if the user doesn't type for 300 milliseconds will you make a request. One other very interesting problem it solves is reporting to analytics. So in our application, we've got a search box, and we wanted to know what typically users are searching for. Again, if you report every single key they have, you're going to maybe have too much data, and it's not going to be relevant. If you only do it when there is a blur on an input, you actually might not get intermediate values that they might have typed. So instead, use reactive programming, and you can observe the input and say, well, I'm going to wait for 1 second, for example. Yep. And if the user doesn't type for 1 second, then I'm going to report the value which is inside the search box.
Yeah, that can be sometimes more difficult if you want to implement it on your own.
Yeah, so if you don't use reactive programming, basically you end up having to write a lot of code. And if you really invest in trying to reduce that boilerplate, you're actually likely to find at the end that the abstractions you're going to create is going to be close to reactive programming. Yep. So the way I like to tell people is that reactive programming is a bit like infrastructure to your code. Like, you just push data, it will flow through operators, but all the behavior which is not linked to your business logic, but to the operation that the operator does is available there, and you can just compose them together.
So it's maybe easier to follow, or
So in terms of reading out intent from a code, once you've got knowledge of basic reactive programming operators, it's definitely readable. It's one line equals one operation, and you can read what's happening. If you've got imperative codes with setting a timeout somewhere, saving the timeout, and then cancel it elsewhere while tracking what the latest promise is from like fetching from an API, that's very difficult to read, or a lot more difficult to read. So reactive programming will give you more compact syntax, which is readable.
Mm-hmm. And this is a question of my own. What are in your experience, the roadblocks for new teams trying
for
to
using reactive programming?
Yeah.
So reactive programming is quite. So people tend to say there is a learning curve to it, and the learning curve can be down to a few factors. One which is commonly mentioned is that it kind of changes the way you think about stuff. Mm-hmm. So it requires you to adapt. And the other like difficulty is actually to try to find a place where you can use it. Quite often, like you can end up having to write a lot of boilerplate code mm-hmm. to create observables, to connect them to a piece of your application. And that can, at the end, I think, be a bit of a hurdle for a lot of people to have to do all this ceremony all the time they want to use reactive programming.
I remember you introduced a library that can help
yes.
on this
yeah, so that's basically what it does is once you choose what reactive programming you want to work mm-hmm. With, and we support 4 currently, which are RxJS, Extreme, Most, and Callback. Okay. Once you choose like which one you want to work for, want to work with, what it's going to provide you is with observables, using that library. So you can observe in React, Preact, or Inferno. You can observe props. You can observe events that you create yourself. You can, if you bring your store as a prop, you can use an enhancer, which will allow you to observe actions or selectors. So, and then you can mix them into your custom business logic, and you return a single observable, mm-hmm. which is going to emit effects. And then those effects, they can be handled internally by Refract, the library that I've introduced, or they can be just values like Redux actions that you're going to pass to an effect handler. And basically your effect handler is going to be a switch map which says, okay, this effect is of type storage, so mm-hmm. Like I'm going to call local storage and set the value, whatever is specified inside the effect object. So you kind of create your own API for effect. But what it does effectively is it removes imperative code from your business logic. So you no longer need to know how to use local storage in every single place where you want to use local storage. You just know that you need to use an effect creator function, similar to an action creator in Redux, which is say, hey, here's the values I want to send to local storage. And then inside local storage, you're going to do that. Same for analytics. You say, oh, I want to send this data to analytics. And you, like inside that effect handler that you can actually reuse throughout your entire application, you can then try to be clever about how you handle stuff. So for example, for analytics, you can try to defer calls to analytics. Okay. You can try to bundle them together if you want to. But these optimizations that you're going to make, you don't have to repeat that logic throughout your entire application.
So it can save you quite a lot of time.
It can save you quite a lot of time, and it can enables you to actually start to optimize your application, but do it in some global way rather than just in random places.
Awesome. Okay, I'll pick a question from the list.
Okay.
If you have any questions, you can use Slido. We have this hash RC18, and you can add any questions at any time. The next question. Of course, this is the new things coming in React. So React uses set state to make the re-rendering more efficient. When using React in a reacting way, aren't we risking the performance of the re-rendering?
So it's quite the opposite. So Refract, the library I've introduced, is using set state under the hood. Okay. So it's not gonna, when you make a change locally, it's not going to render your entire application. It's like when you use connect with React Redux, it uses set state under the hood. You don't have to worry about it. The only thing you want to do is that I want to connect this component with this piece of data. So either like whether or not you do it in a reactive way or in a more imperative way, actually the reactive way is so I'm not going to say it's more performant, but it can bring performance optimizations. And the biggest one is that you can control when things are being computed or observed and pushed to the state of your component. So I'm going to take like Redux as an example again. When you use connect and you use map state to props, all the selectors you use, they're going to be recomputed on every single state change.
Sure.
Whether you're interested in a value initially or the change of that value over time, you won't have the choice. This selector is going to be called every single time. If you want that behavior to not happen, you've got to use memoization, and memoization is actually quite, it's a bit verbose to do. Like in Redux, there's this library called reselect, and I mean, I've seen a lot of people not having a clue about what he was doing and what he was really for initially. With reactive programming, you could say, I want to observe this selector. I want to filter falsy values, and I want to take one. And that means basically that once you've take one value which was like truthy, which was there, which existed, the stream will complete, and it will no longer observe that selector. So it will never recompute the value. And what you can do as well is that once you've got a value, you can start to invoke more selectors, and you can chain that logic, and you're not stuck with, here's the behavior of my map state to props, which will call all the selectors from the time my component is mounted to the time it mounts, whatever data they return.
Okay. Well, now that you're talking about this, is there any reactive implementation of Redux?
So Redux is reactive itself. The thing is that it's not granular. So you've got actions which are sent to the store, and then they propagate through your registers. And then for each action, there's going to be a new state object. So the store is actually reactive in Redux. You can observe the store, but what you will get is the whole state. So whatever something has changed, then that's why we use selectors to like have a slice of the state we're interested in. Typically, what we do when we want to, in Refract, is we observe the store, we map a selector, and then we use in RxJS an operator called distinct until changed, which will only emit values which are new, like not equal to the previous one. But you can't really get away from having to observe the whole state and get all the updates through.
Okay. Do you know about, how is it called, observable?
The ES7 specification?
No, it's observable. I forgot now. But they built a Redux implementation using RxJS. And it's the logo is kind of free,
like Redux Observable.
This one?
Yes. So Redux Observable is a very similar approach that I'm offering, but it's only limited to Redux. So what you can do with Redux Observable is you can observe actions, you do your logic, and what you do at the end is to map, also to dispatch another action.
Right.
What we can do in Refract is that we can observe Redux actions, Redux state. Actually, you can do in Redux state now in Redux Observable.
Okay.
We can observe component props and events, and then so that's already like a lot more things we can observe.
It gives you more options.
Yes, and then what we can do, like on the other side, is you can dispatch actions if you want. You just need to implement the logic in the effect handler. You can push to any effect you want, like storage, analytics. Then, like your basically the limit is what your application requires. There's basically no limit in the type of effects you can implement. And you can also push to props for your components, and you can push to even directly push some JSX, some elements.
Awesome.
So it's a lot more, like compared to Redux Observable, it's a lot more general purposed. So it's not just like one specific case. And everything you do today in Redux Observable, you actually can do in Refract, with the added benefits of collocating the logic to your components rather than globally in your application. True. So all this business logic, if I like, maybe I should give a bit of more background on the library itself, Refract. Sure. The reason why it came about is because we have a large-scale application, and we've been looking at having views of this application, which is just a single component that you mount and unmount, but all the logic, the business logic of that component regarding what requests they have to make and what analytics they need to report, like all of that, belongs to the view itself and is not the concern of the overall application skeleton.
I see. And
that way, your initial bundle actually can be smaller because all these like effects you can describe in Redux Observable or Redux Saga are not in your main bundle. Like actually, just to be completely clear, you can do that. You can do partially that in Redux Observable and Saga to kind of register things after the facts, but it's not as powerful that what actually we can offer.
I see. Well, that's a good answer. Thanks a lot. Let's see if we can gather some questions from the audience here. No experts around. Oh, we have a question. Excellent.
So in terms of like the handlers, would it make sense to have like one global handler or like a handler per component?
Depends. So we try to, in our documentation, we try to say that actually try to use a global effect handler. So this way, in fact, so if you look at the higher order component, which is exported by Refract, which is called with effects, it has it's a series of arguments you can pass. So what you can do basically is provide, you can bound it with your effect handler, and then provide that bounded higher order component to the rest of your application. So that way you never have to worry about like having to kind of create your higher order component from scratch. Without an example, it's a bit difficult to describe. But yeah, if you go online and look in the docs, you'll see what I mean.
Yeah. Of course, that will require some little example that you can show that.
Yeah. So we have examples on the repository on what.
Are you going to do a workshop during the?
No, I'm not doing a workshop now.
Day? No.
Maybe in the future.
Okay, that would be perfect to show this. Well, I'll take another question. So this question is saying, like, aren't you coupling too much with the view with your API layer? So is that an issue?
So I guess that question is coming from the demo. I mean, you're not coupling it.
So how are you binding with the
So
view?
like you can use dependency injection to inject. So if you've got, for example, an API dependency, which is a collection of methods that you can call to make calls to your API, what you do is that you just inject that dependency. You don't have to, build the URL,
The whole API.
like inside your function when you want to make a call. You just say, for example, let's call get user API call. There's no. I mean, I'm not sure I understand where the question is coming from. I don't know if anyone here has asked it and will want to clarify.
Anyone knows the context? No. Yeah, we can move on. I mean, if
no,
they,
like I
if
don't
they
think
want
there
to
is
ask-
coupling. If anything, there is co-location, which I think adds more benefits.
Yeah, no,
if there is not,
nothing
yeah.
specific that
Yeah.
you cannot use in React in other libraries. Okay, so let's move to the next question. Why I should represent components as functions? Functions are stateless by definition. Instead, components have state and props. So we can use OOP to represent them. So you are more like a function, or you're defending.
I'm not defending anything in particular. I'm just showing what you can achieve with a particular approach.
I think you can use both.
In a component, there is two parts. In fact, there are two parts. There is like the state and the projection of that state into visual elements. Changing state and props into virtual elements is purely a transformation. You take name, and you wrap a div around it. It's just expressing a piece of data a different way. So whether you use OOP or functional programming, I think it's not done necessarily to state. It's more about data flow inside your application. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think we have seen, if you have been around in the last few days, we have seen few examples using hooks, just replacing one component by a function, and then the opposite, both are possible.
Like in hooks is actually a different way to express the same thing. So it's more about verbosity than whether you want to use a class or a function, because what it does actually is introduce impurity in a function. But again, it's all about composition. So maybe the definition of components is slightly going to change with hooks, but you still have collecting data and then transforming that data into virtual elements using JSX. So, I think it's more a different way to compose things, but a class is also I don't know, if people get caught up into the idea of purity, a class is as impure as hooks, but you can't make everything pure, because otherwise you just end up rendering your whole application every time something changes, which you don't want. So it's all really about trade-offs, I would say.
That will be easier with a function than with a component anyway.
Yes. Actually, I'm trying to not push.
Well, we are moving to a bigger topic.
To be honest, I've lost touch with OOP for some years now. So I just don't want to sort of I'm more here to demonstrate what you can achieve with what I know very well, and not necessarily trying to say what the benefits are of this approach over OOP. If you're on an OOP expert, and if it's your thing, I think you can only be the judge of whether my proposition is better than what you're used to.
And you think you can achieve the same result?
It's always going to.
Maybe it's not.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a bit more verbose to have OOP. The main difference between function and objects with methods is methods are aware of the object itself and tend to mutate the object itself, as opposed to a function which is just being passed an object and return a new one if you're doing it in a functional way. At the end, when you come to actually architecture of applications, people will you kind of tend to realize that there's not so much difference between the two. It's really just a different way to express or making your data flow through your application.
Okay. Let's take another question. So the next question is, can you mix Redux with Refract?
Yes, you can. Does it make sense? Yes. We depends. We depends what your application is. So what I particularly like myself with Redux is the global actions, not necessarily the global state, because when we've got reducers, they all receive the same actions. So that's really good that the actions are global, but the reducers, they don't necessarily care about each other. So I think there is like in my experience of what we've been doing with Redux, when we started using it 3 years ago, we followed the dogmatic approach of the community, which was everything has to be global. And we found limitations to that, which made us reevaluate our position, which is like, yeah, some stuff are good to be global, and some stuff are good to be local. And you can, Refract actually allows you to mix these kind of things together without necessarily making your app look like a complete nonsense.
That's good then. Yeah. So the answer is yes. You
can mix definitely makes sense. I think Refract is more a tool than something opinionated. So you can bring whatever you want to it, and then it's basically what makes sense for you and your application.
Right. Well, I'll take last question. So here it's RxJS chain streams are done by transducers, or is it iterated multiple times? This is kind of an in-depth question.
I have no idea. I actually don't work with RxJS on a daily basis, but work with Extreme. I am not aware of the internals of RxJS, so I couldn't answer.
We need some more time to go back
I mean,
to
if someone has the answer, please, shout it out.
Okay, then we'll skip.
There you go.
Oh, we have. Nice.
So RxJS doesn't use transducers always. There is the method transduce you can pass here. But in the RxJS there are cold and hot streams, and it's a big conundrum of the library. And on that depends if something will be called multiple times because multiple subscriptions there are for this, or it will be so-called cached because it's called transducer. When it's called, it's executed every time someone subscribes to it.
Yeah, so we I think with Refract, and in UI development in general, we are much more interested in hot observables.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting confused. But yeah, basically, once you subscribe, you're getting values
from that moment,
from that moment on time and onwards, rather than anything which happened before.
Yeah. Cool. Good. Thanks. Maybe we can wrap up. How would you wrap up? What will be the features that you think people can use from Refract that they can apply to their projects?
So I think there's not necessarily Refract itself, but there is a lot of power and benefits in trying to use reactive programming techniques, or anyway using anything which enables you to manipulate time and do things, with time. With the talk, which was right after me from David, is another way to conceive these ideas using state charts. I think those things are extremely powerful, and just having them in mind the day you need them is actually quite good because you'll know that you can reach for this kind of tooling.
Yeah, I think that there's more people getting interested with reactivity, and we can see a few examples of that.
Yeah. And there's, I think, another aspect I mentioned already also is being able to. So if we look at Redux, because Redux is really well known. Redux, as I mentioned, is observable, right?
True.
And because it's observable, it has seen a lot of innovation. So, there's been Redux Saga and Redux Observable, because you've got this kind of like central point where everything is converging. So it's just actually very easy to look at what's happening. And you can look at middleware functions in Redux, and you can do something on specific actions. But also what people have realized with this approach is that you don't necessarily want to centralize everything anymore. So what Refract enables you with, and I think state charts as well, with communicating to different state charts, is be able to decentralize your logic and collocate it with the components where it makes sense. I think the biggest example is if you have a form, if you have a view, if something you have something which is a feature, just collocate that logic. Everything to do with the logic of handling user interactions, communicating with different services, receiving data from the network. Just like wrap this component with the data.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for joining the Ask Me Anything session. He will be available for the rest of the conference, so if you have any more questions, feel free to reach him. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.